In regards to the Isur, the prohibition of shatnez, Chazal tell us that this, we learn out from the Pasuk, that there is no prohibition of shatnez when it comes to tzitzis. In tzitzis, one would be allowed to have, biblically, midayraisa, wool and linen together. Similarly, one of the bigdei kahuna, one of the garments of the kohanim, the avnei, the special belt, was a mixture of wool and linen. So the Rebbe points out, and the Rebbe asks, seemingly, we know there's also other types of kilayim that are forbidden, other types of mixtures that are forbidden. You're not allowed to crossbreed animals or working with different animals together. You're not allowed to plant different types of things together. These are also called kilayim. And yet, by those things, there's absolutely no permission given. There's no heter to be allowed to use mixes of these things in the Beis HaMikdash or for karbonos. And yet, by shatnez, that would be permitted. Why the difference? In addition to this, says the Rebbe, let's have a look at another prohibition that's in some way similar to kilayim. And that is the Isur, the prohibition of not cooking milk and meat together, which is also a similar sort of idea where you're taking two permissible things and we're not allowed to cook them together and bring them together. In regards to basar b'chalav, we find in the Mechilta says that perhaps basar b'chalav should be allowed to be done with things in the Beis HaMikdash or karbonos, etc. And yet we learn out from a pasuk, no, we're not allowed to do it even in regards to holy items. So in other words, what we in total have is three different groups or three different categories. In regards to shatnez, we say we are actually allowed to do it in the Beis HaMikdash for the bigdei kahuna or tzitzis. Tzitzis, not in the Beis HaMikdash as well, in other words, for holy things. Basar b'chalav, we say, well, there's a thought that we should have been allowed to do it, and we learn out from a pasuk, no, you can't do it. And then when it comes to the mixtures of animals or plants, there is actually no room even to consider that it should be allowed in other cases. So the Rebbe's question is, why the difference in these three groups? In order to understand this, the Rebbe looks at a Ramban that tells us, we know that Chazal say that the Yetzer Hara and the Goyim challenged the Yidden regarding what kind of business is it not to be able to wear wool and linen together. Says the Ramban, but this is only true in regards to shatnez. The other forms of kilayim they're not bothered by. And why is that? Because Hashem created the world in a very, very perfect way, and that each plant and each animal should remain exactly that, whatever type of species and kind it is. So we don't have the right to start crossbreeding them, creating hybrids and things like that, because we're changing Hashem's creation. So there's a very, very major difference then between the kilayim of animals and plants versus the kilayim of clothes, of shatnez. Because when we are putting different animals or plants together, we are now going to be creating some new species or some new sort of animal or plant, which wasn't originally part of what Hashem made. Whereas when it comes to clothes, the wool and linen technically never really united as one. You could always separate the wool and linen from each other. According to this, says the Rebbe, now let's have a look at basar b'chalav and milk and meat. In some ways it's similar to shatnez, but in other ways it's similar to the other forms of mixtures. In some ways, it's like shatnez because you're not creating something new after putting the milk and meat together. It's not like now there's going to be new things coming out of that. That's some sort of new creature, some sort of new thing. On the other hand, when we cook the milk and meat together, they did become right now one unit of milk and meat together, which is a totally new type of thing that wasn't there before. They united as one, they became one. It's not, you can't take them apart anymore, like in the case of shatnez, the wool and linen. And so therefore, this is another category in between these two types of shatnez on the one hand, and the other forms of kilayim on the other hand. Now, says the Rebbe, the Rabbeinu B'chaya tells us that in regards to the Isur of kilayim, this prohibition of mixing things together, the problem is that what we're actually doing is we're mixing the spiritual forces of these different types of things together and taking two opposites, mixing them together, which doesn't work out very well. What's explained is that wool and linen represent chesed and gevura. So too the ox and the donkey. So too milk and meat. And therefore it's not appropriate to take these opposite things that don't really blend together and go well together. We can't really attach them and bring them together. The question, however, is, isn't this contrary to what we learn in so many places, in Chassidus specifically, that there's such a great idea of bringing opposites together? We know the whole Torah was given to us. Las is shalom boilim, to bring harmony and peace into the world. In Chassidus, we know the concept that Avodas Hashem is all about Hiskalelus Hamidos, being able to integrate our different character traits together, being able to be more flexible and bending one character trait from the other, not remaining very firm in one particular way. And yet here we're saying that the issue, the prohibition of Kilayim, is to mix these two midos together. How do we understand it? So the explanation that's given is that when it comes to matters of Kedusha, in essence, there are really no opposites at all. All the different character traits or all the different things always have that one common theme together, and therefore they're like one species in a certain sense, because they're all focused on the one mission of serving Hashem. It has that bittul to Hashem, feeling that nullification to Hashem, and therefore even when you have opposite things like Chesed and Gevurah, they're never really truly opposites, and therefore they could come together. Famously, it says, Oisa Sholem b'mroim Hashem makes peace in the heavens. Chazal tell us this means that you have Michael, the Malach of water, Gavriel, the Malach of fire, but they don't extinguish each other. Because in the presence of Hashem, they feel that they're for the one mission purpose, serving Hashem, they're not opposing each other. Therefore, they could come together. Whereas when it comes to mundane things, which the very nature of our world is that everything takes up a lot of space and comes with its own full identity and character, etc., each one cannot tolerate the other, and they're going to be in contradiction to each other. Says the Rebbe, based on this, we're going to understand the different types of kilayim. What the Rebbe says is the following. Again, when we speak about holy things, there's no problem of different things coming together because we're all here, have the common denominator. We're all serving Hashem together. When it comes to mundane things, so here we're going to have the difference. You see, when you try to combine different things together, one of two things could happen. Either the identity, the character of each one of these things is going to be diminished or going to be completely canceled out. That's the only way you're going to be able to bring them together. So they're not feeling anymore what they stand for. That's one option. The other option is each one is going to still remain full force. And if you're going to bring them together, there's going to be conflict. So here is going to be the difference between the two extremes or kinds of kilayim. By the kilayim, by the mixtures of animals or plants, since the purpose is to bring out some new breed coming from that, the person is changing the way Hashem made it. In other words, you're taking away the original character or identity of what each animal is supposed to be, and you're making something else. This sort of mixture, there's totally no room for. And as we'll see, this you can't even have, even in the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, even in holy things. Whereas when it comes to the kilayim of clothes, where we said that the linen is remaining linen, the wool is remaining wool. So each one is remaining in its full character. And what did we say? Then you're just going to have conflict. You're not going to be able to bring them together because each one is remaining what it is. And that's why in mundane things, there's no room for that either because you're just going to have the conflict. As opposed to if it's going to be in Kedusha, as we'll soon see, there we'll be able to have that. So now let's look again at the three things, the three different groups of mixtures. And if it could apply in the Beis HaMikdash or not. When we come to shatnez, since the whole problem, the wool and linen again was that each one is remaining in its identity. It's just a matter that when they're full force, they wouldn't be able to handle each other. But if it's being used for a mitzvah and kedusha, in other words, what's being felt inside of each identity, each character is that we're all here for the same purpose, for serving Hashem, then we could bring them together. And they could exist. And therefore in the Beis HaMikdash, we could have the shatnez or in the tzitzis. However, in the types of kilayim, where each thing is going to become completely nullified, losing its character, like in the case of the animals or the plants, there's no room for at all, even in the Beis HaMikdash, even in holy things. Hashem created everything with its own identity, and we need to leave it that way. We don't just cancel out the characters and identities of things. When it comes to basar b'cholo, as we said before, this is a bit of a mixture between the two different kinds. It leans to both sides. It could go either way. On the one hand, you could say it's more similar to the wool and linen because you're not going to be creating something new coming out of this milk. You still have the milk and meat in there. And that's why maybe it should be allowed in the Beis HaMikdash. And that's why the Mechilta said maybe it should be allowed. But then we say no, even in the Beis HaMikdash it's not allowed. Because the bottom line is, when you're cooking it, it is becoming something new that wasn't there before. So it's losing the characters of the things that were there previously. And therefore we say, no, even in the Beis HaMikdash, this is not appropriate. The Rebbe finishes off the Sikha by saying a very interesting thing that the Rabbeinu Bechaya says, that in the future, when Mashiach comes, the Isser of Basar B'chalav is going to be gone. And why should that be? Based on what we explained, the Rebbe explains it now. Because we just said that Basar B'chalav, the main issue is that physically, as they are right now, they do seem to be mixed together. Something new was created, and each one lost its identity. The meat and the milk are no longer meat and milk. But deep down inside, we said, really, they do still each one preserve its own thing, more similar to the shatnez, to the wool and linen, which represents, in other words, the inner part of the Basar B'chalav, the spiritual aspect of the Chesed and Gevurah, really still main if we're looking at it in the pure way, in the godly way. And therefore, when Mashiach comes and things will be revealed, what their Pnimius is, we'll see the godliness in everything. Therefore, even in something like Basar B'chalav, we'll be able to combine them to become one and to have the true Achdus.